Hello everyone, welcome to Carl's Tech Shed again. Right, well today I've got an email from YouTube user TheWombleMaster who wants to know the best way of putting an extra hard drive in his shuttle PC. Now what he wants to know is whether to go for Sata 2 or Sata 3. Now this brings in a range of questions. It all depends on the interface on the motherboard. Now he mentioned that he's got a shuttle PC which will carry a smaller motherboard like this one here, which is a micro ATX. Now because these have the majority of ports on the back already, such as USB, parallel, VGA, network and so on, they only have one expansion slot. Now this one has a standard PCI expansion slot, however some later boards may have PCI Express. Now it all depends on the speed of the SATA. Now SATA 1 is 1.5 gigabits per second, SATA 2 will be 3 gigabits a second, and SATA 3 will be 6 gigabits per second. So this all depends on the interface that you're going to be running the interface card on. Now I've got a series of SATA cards here lined up. First of all, we've got the standard PCI SATA card, which is a 32-bit 66 MHz bus. This will fit into any PC with a standard PCI slot, including this micro ITX board here. Now the second one I've got is known as a PCI-X or 64-bit PCI interface. This is more common on servers and high-end workstations than it is on PCs. So it's unlikely that a shuttle PC will have this interface to use this card. The third one I've got is a PCI Express card. Now this is a PCI Express 1 card, which this will handle, I believe it will be around 4 gigabits per second, whereas the PCI-X will handle 8 gigabits per second, and the PCI 66 MHz will handle around 1 gigabit per second. So you can see there's a noticeable difference. Now, if the shuttle PC has a PCI Express slot, either 1 speed, 2 speed, 4, 8 or 16, you can pop one of these cards in. They're relatively cheap. I got this one on eBay for around £4 or £5. It has two SATA 2 ports on there, but you can also get SATA 3. However, I do believe that may well be in PCI Express 4 or 8 times. In the unlikely event that it does have a PCI-X slot, which again I said I highly doubt it will, but if anyone's considering this for their PC, then this, as I said, has an 8 gigabits per second bandwidth. This particular card here is actually a SATA RAID card, which has an onboard hardware RAID controller. These are considerably more expensive than the other two, simply because of the number of ports and the fact that it's a RAID controller with onboard cache. These retail at the moment on eBay for around £50 second hand. The new price will be around £400. That's because these are not expected to be purchased by individuals, but rather corporations and businesses who generally have a relatively large budget for their IT spend every year. The cheaper one here is a standard PCI slot. As I mentioned, it's just a normal 66 MHz bus, which is around 1 gigabit per second. So if you can get hold of one of these cards, you can pick them up very cheaply on eBay. If you can find one second hand, the bidding usually starts at around £1, and you can pick them up for little more than that. So if you've got a PCI slot, the maximum you're going to get out of that is 1 gigabit per second. Now bear in mind that SATA 1 is 1.5 gigabits per second, so you will have about you will lose about a third of bandwidth if you're only using one port, and if you're using both ports, then you'll lose 2/3 of the bandwidth. On the other hand, if you're using a SATA card with the PCI-X interface, because this carries up to 8 gigabits per second, if you're only using 2 ports rather than all 8 at once, then the maximum speed that you'll get is 8 gigabits per second across several drives. Whereas if you're using the PCI Express card, again, this has a bandwidth of 4 gigabits per second, so if you're only using one drive, then you'll get the full bandwidth of 3 gigabits per second on Sata 2. If you're using Sata 1, which is 1.5 gigabits per second, then you can use 2 ports at full speed. So it all depends on the interface that you've got in your system. As I said, the best way to do it is to find out what it all depends on what you're using it for. If you're only using it for films and movies, music, that sort of thing, then in my opinion Sata 1 or Sata 2 will be fine. However, if you're rendering video, you're moving over very large quantities of files and you need that done at high speed, then Sata 2 or Sata 3 is definitely the way forward. Yeah, so we can come to a conclusion that if you have a PCI interface card, if you have a PCI slot on your motherboard, then PCI card with Sata 1 or Sata 2 will be fine. But anything more than that and you start to bottleneck on PCI card, with Sata, a Sata card on PCI Express or PCI-X, you'll have very little bottlenecking, so you'll be able to use that's probably the best interface to use if you can get it, but if not, then a PCI card should work fine. Well, thanks for listening, thanks for visiting this video, and if you've got any questions or comments, or you'd like me to do a video review or answer any questions, then please drop me an email like TheWombleMaster did.